As we get ready to go to prayer, a couple things, and I've got this posted up here. Obviously, the memorial is today, and I'll mention that in the prayer. I was thinking about this even before we were watching a special this morning on Charlie Kirk, and they brought up Billy Graham. We haven't seen evangelism or the gospel presented in what's going to happen today at a national level in a long time. And we're at a unique moment in our nation's history. How people are going to respond, I don't know, but we need to be in prayer. The gospel is going to be preached today. And there are going to be a lot of people who haven't heard it before, have heard it differently before. Latest estimate is there are going to be 300,000 people there live. They can't handle all that. Even the overflow is not going to be able to handle that. I do not believe the enemy, Satan, anticipated this much response from this. How the church responds, how Christians respond. Be in prayer for Turning Point. This is just a significant inflection point for them. One of the things up here, and this is a quote from Charlie Kirk, at the very last one is, seek true joy. And I was listening to a podcast this week, I think it was Ezra Institute's, almost positive. And they had a series just the last 2 months on Christianity in the state or Christianity in government. I can't remember what it was called, like 5 or 6. One of those, they mentioned that a sociologist had done a study on cultures, nations around the world, the influence of basically religion. It's like religion always has a positive influence on a culture. And this was a sociologist, not a Christian, said, but the unique thing about Christianity in a culture is not just the order it brings, says, but what was unique, this sociologist found, was Christians have joy. That was the unique thing about Christianity, is the joy they bring, whether it be persecution or suffering or good things that are going on, they have a joy in them. So we want to remember that as we go to prayer and as we begin our study this morning. Let me switch to the real lesson, because that's not what this is going to be about this morning. Just want to make sure everything's working. It should be. Awesome. All right, let's pray. Our Father and our God, we are amazed again at your sovereignty. It is such a privilege to be a part of your unfolding plan. You give us the opportunity to live out in real time in history as this unfolds. The last several weeks have been both sobering and encouraging, as we've seen a response to the gospel in ways that we could not have imagined 2 weeks ago. We ask us specifically for your protection in Glendale, Arizona today. That is going to be a focal point of the enemy, as well as those who love you and trust you. Keep all those there safe, but most importantly, Lord, may your gospel word be preached. May it be received. May we just see amazing effects from that this morning and throughout. Give us all wisdom as we navigate through this. We thank you for the opportunity in this class to discuss some challenging things and give us charity as we discuss with one another. Bring all this before you in Christ's name. Amen. All right, going forward this morning. I'm hoping we have discussion this morning, although I'm going to try and motor through some stuff really quickly. Just a quick reminder of the resource link. We only got a couple weeks left, one more week after this. The review and discussion is going to be different this morning. It's going to be more of a feedback from you and a quick application. I want to frame this first because I'm going to put a couple of posts from X/Twitter up here. There's commendable things in these messages you're going to see, but I also want you to, I'm going to want some feedback, see if you're connecting dots. Could it be messaged differently? What are these people trying to communicate? Think in terms of keys of the kingdom, who holds that, and think in terms of Christian liberty that we also discussed last week. So, couple of quick Twitter posts up here. Pastor Mark Driscoll says, and this was referring to last Sunday, right? If your church, I need my glasses to see it from this point. If your church didn't address the demonic murder of Charlie Kirk this weekend, the pastor is a coward and needs to repent or resign. And Sarah Gonzalez, who I don't know personally, but I know she's very active both at Blaze and also politically active in Texas. If your church didn't mention Charlie today, find a new church. So, what are these people trying to communicate that's commendable? First of all, the messaging. What are they trying to? Right? If you weren't here last week, or if you were, I hope you realized it in our service at least 3 times, right? And even before, but including before, at least 3 times that the murder and the life of Charlie was brought up. Alan Connor brought it up during announcements, the preparatory announcement, fairly lengthy, perfectly appropriate. The congregational prayer, Casey did a great job, appropriately focusing, a lot of emphasis. And Alan brought up Charlie as an example. I honestly don't know what any message you could preach anywhere that couldn't have used that as an example, in which Charlie wanted to be remembered for the courage for his faith. How you can't put that into any message, I don't know. If you're preaching the gospel. So, I'll lay it before you. What's commendable about what they're trying to communicate here?
Pointing out a saint who was murdered for his gospel witness.
Right. And it's a significant event, right? It's not, saints are, we don't come here every week and mention all the people who are martyred around the world, which happens, right? Christians, this was a significant event. Some people are trying to think through history and it's like, this might be the first really significant Christian martyr in American history. I don't know enough history, but people trying to rack their brain, they're trying to figure that out. That's a significant event for the church. It is appropriate. However, again, thinking keys of the kingdom, Christian liberty, what's a concern here in how this is posted? Who holds okay, let's make it real personal. Northwest Bible Church. Let's say we haven't mentioned Charlie last week at all during the service. Who holds the keys to the kingdom in this church, Northwest Bible Church? Who holds the keys here?
The elders.
The elders hold the keys. Do these 2 individuals know our elders? Is this the appropriate way to communicate that to the elders on social media? What's the appropriate way? Right? If you really believe that, right? Make a phone call. Really, it should be your congregants. Hey, right? All that. We have to be careful, folks, especially social media is just so easy. And by the way, this stuff was flying all over the place. Multiple people were reposting this type of thing. Then it became a funny meme, right? If your pastor doesn't mention, vegetables today, you need to leave the church. Christian liberty, it's like you need to trust God in how He's handling other churches to a point. Now, there's also the point where there are churches who are refusing to do it because they are cowardly. But that can be pointed out differently. Just be careful. And that's going to apply to everything we discuss because there's going to be differences of opinion, as we're going to see. That's what the whole lesson's about today. We're going to open today, Joseph, with your question for discussion. And then we're going to look at, we were going to try to get to this last week. I had a feeling we wouldn't get there. We will. Pastor Andy Naselli did a lot of hard work. He came up with his own taxonomy, a spectrum of major views on political theology. When he was asked, what book or resource can you suggest on this, he said, I can't find one. That's why he did this. He can't recommend. You can find a book on, the 4 different views on eschatology, right? All covenant, right? You can find those. There's nothing out there. Nothing. So he took his best stab at it. I think he did a pretty good job. Even he will admit it's not perfect. And then the whole series that Christ Overall did, they did 12 interviews on Christian Nation. I know it's crazy. I mean, don't freak out when you see Christian nationalism. The whole point of this is not to discuss that per se. It's really because and I think you'll see, it's going to help us understand all our discussions, because their interviews were with pros and cons, and the really encouraging thing is they found out we basically agree on all the really important stuff. All the really important stuff. Don't get bogged down in all the rest of this. And that was, I encourage you, when you have the time, go through that whole series. The interviews were fascinating. There are going to be people that you agree with, disagree with, people you didn't know, and this is one of those challenges where you listen to someone, it's like, those are really good points. I hadn't thought of that. And then another person comes along with a different view. It's like, those are really good points. and they're not in the same camp as this other person, which is the whole point of this class. We're going to be there. We're all going to have those struggles. So, Joseph, I'm going to ask you first, if I've captured this accurately, what if 60% of the country becomes Christian, and how should Christians use this power? Is that a fair enough assessment of your question? I'll open it up for discussion for a couple of minutes, and then if we get bogged down, I'm going to go to what I think is almost the exact same question that was actually in the stuff we were going to be studying this week. So, who wants to open up? Let me encourage you to ask clarifying questions, maybe of Joseph first.
I've also been waiting 12 weeks to push back. We've already talked about
Well,
it.
okay.
So
I'm going to ask you to hold off, because there will be an appropriate time during this class to bring that. There will be.
All right.
No one? Okay, so by name. So what? So what would a clarifying question be to ask Joseph at this point from about his question? It's one of the important things to do when you're, right, if you're going to debate or discuss this, it's like define your terms, right? Define your terms. So we can ask that. What would you define as a Christian?
That is pretty loose, because, well, talk to anybody in Oklahoma almost, they're going to say they're a Christian. I would say, let's say 60% of the country is not only a professing, legitimate, Holy Spirit-filled Christian, but also has a biblical word. They read the Bible, they apply it to life.
So I'm going to dig a little deeper. So would that be, could Catholics be involved in that? And
I'm not the Lord, I don't know.
No,
I presume there are, I believe there are.
and
People that are saved.
I don't disagree with that. So
But I can't make that decision.
Right.
myself.
good Orthodox Jews.
Well, they don't.
Okay.
believe in the triune God, so that's
But a biblical worldview, they might follow.
Maybe.
I mean,
maybe.
right? This is not as
But I'm talking just Christian, straight up.
okay. The other piece of this question is the idea of power, and I assume you mean governance, some type of governance, political, right? Also could be cultural.
Other
right?
Bureaucratic.
Okay.
Make rules in whatever organization you're in charge of.
All right, let me go ahead and if you listened or even read the material, it wasn't that much. This question was in there. It's right in the middle, and I'll read the whole section of this in a minute. And their question was basically, if most of the citizens in our government, in our nation, were genuine Christians, what would be the best way to steward that influence? Is that really similar to your question?
Should the percentage make any determination on how Christians live their lives?
Okay, so that first of all, is the percentage matter. If I'm the only Christian in my nation, does that determine how I live my life?
Right.
Now, it might determine how much influence you can have,
Right.
but that's out of my hands, right? If I'm the only that's not me. I really believe this question and Joseph's is more of collectively, what should we pursue? Should we
We're
pursue?
not presuming that we would live our lives in a different
Right.
way.
You're going to live faithfully no matter what.
Yeah.
It's just, whether we'll be having God's judgment quicker or longer.
Well, and more people would be bold. When you're in the minority, there's a lot of people who are not bold because they're fearful. Rightly so. We saw Charlie Kirk shot down.
Which goes right back to one of those posts. Your pastor is cowardly. I mean, that is one of the things there. There are churches which have been cowardly. They aren't being bold when they should be, even for whatever reason.
Right.
That's not an untrue statement that was made. It may not have been the best forum or the best messaging, but that wasn't untrue. Let me read the whole context of this discussion. And this was during the, both of these things we're going to cover today. There's like a long form essay, there's a reading of a long form essay, but then there's an interview with the author, and that's where the really interesting stuff gets fleshed out. And that's where this was coming from. One of the challenges we're facing is we're having to do a couple of things at the same time. We're having to think in terms of theory, and then we have to think rightly about these matters, biblically, theologically, politically. Then we have to deal with the present context that we live in. So it really, we've talked about this before, especially the more academic side is ideas, right? You've got to have the foundation of the ideas before you act, or the doctrine, as it were. But then we still have the present reality, the application. And the context we live in seems to be evaporating around us. What should the church be doing presently? How do we preserve our present constitutional structures that are very, very helpful, wise in terms of how they were laid out, but we're losing the balance of powers? The executive branch has taken way much power, more power than the founders would have ever envisioned, and so on. And we can say that about, especially the bureaucracy, all that, right? The executive branch. How do we fight on that front as Christians? Because we are citizens of this country and we have the responsibility to vote and to exercise our view. At the same time, we have to think, what theoretically should we be doing, right? And it's a challenging task that we need people that are laying out the theory, but we also need the practitioners to say, we live in a real world and we have to do something. So the author chimed in. It was hard to keep track of who was speaking, but this was the author. He said, Andy Naselli said, my burden in doing all this, he was talking about the taxonomy and reviewing basically his reflections on the interviews. My burden in doing all of this and really diving into political theology, as he said, I'm thinking it's good to go through the hypothetical scenario. If most of the citizens in our government and our nation were genuine Christians, what would be the best way to steward that influence? That's worth talking about and discussing. He says, but then he adds, but right now, we're nowhere close to that. Right now, our government and our culture is marginalizing and even persecuting Christians. I guess you could add to that, they're even shooting them. So I'd argue this is not the time for the 4s and the 5s. And 4s and 5s, you'll see that in a minute, that's in his taxonomy. It's not the time for them to sharply separate over what the ideal political theology would be. Right now, the orcs aren't just at the gates, they're on the city council. They're all over, they're in power. And we should be able to band together as a small minority, as we are, and say, can we fight together against transgender mutilation, against LGBT ideology, against abortion, against wokeness, against socialism? Can we do that? So that was his response. So part of your response, Jeff, people call themselves Christians, 60 to 70%. Joseph's saying, no, we're looking for spirit-filled believers who are acting that out. 60%, we're nowhere close to that number, right? So what's purpose number one of the church anyway? Right? Preach the gospel, disciple. So that it's certainly a question.
Just preach the gospel.
Yeah, discipling the nations. So in order to even be able to enact that question, we got to get to that number. We have a question on that number in a minute, but and the pastor's saying, I think rightfully so, we need to act. There's things we can do now before, and we should do before we get to that number. So I read that excerpt. I'm going to ask this question: why a majority? And I'll bring up a couple of notions here. If it's a true majority, what kind of governing challenges would we anticipate? And that's, what am I saying? If you have 60% of the country that's truly Christian, okay, what should we anticipate as many difficulties as we have right now?
Yes.
And
People are involved. You say that all the time.
People are involved, and even Christians are going to sin.
And they're also going to have different views of everything. So you have
But they've got to Joseph's point, they've got a biblical worldview.
No, I mean, they're going to look at every issue differently.
Okay.
Even if they have a worldview, there are bleeding heart Christians. Oh, we've got to do all this. We've got to take money from you rich people and give it to these poor people.
Is that a biblical worldview?
No.
Okay. His premise is 60% of them are spirit-filled and have a biblical worldview. Take that, seriously, take that premise. Is that going to be as big a challenge in governing? So it's not a bad thing, right? There's still going to be challenges because we're all sinners, and there's no doubt. And I'm bringing this up because of some experience I have, right? And good and bad ways. So it's going to sound strange, but convention of states are in fact our biggest opposition on the right came from the John Birch Society and the Eagle Forum and their opposition. And their basic argument is, if they aren't following the Constitution now, why, if you go ahead and put amendments to it, would they change it? We just don't have the people are not capable of doing this no matter what you change the Constitution to say. And the response would be, okay, once you get to that point, why would you need to change the Constitution, right? They're almost saying that if you get to where everybody's following the Constitution, then there's no need to amend it. So it's somewhat the same point in that, okay, so if it's a true majority, the challenges are going to change drastically, right? Not that there aren't challenges. Another quote. Now, I heard Mike Ferris say this, but I doubt he was the first one to say this. Maybe he was. But in politics or governance, the victory goes to the majority of those who participate. You don't need a true majority, numbers-wise, to affect change. You don't. That doesn't have to be true. So, what do I mean by participation? What are some things you can do to participate?
So like Gene put out a call this week to call our senator and give him our opinion, and so all of our input was similar.
So right, so there's activism at that point. So I know we talked about this a little bit, what's the lowest bar as citizens we have here? Voting, right? That's okay, right? It's still, you still got to tip, you should still go to a polling place, although mail in and all. Right?
And maybe before that, just to simply be aware of what's going on.
Be aware, right? Take it, right? Be an informed voter before you go vote. And that takes work too.
Mhm.
That takes more work than just showing up and, they used to have straight party balloting or voting in Texas, where I'm just going to vote for this party. I only have to make one check mark and I'm done because I just want to get out of here. Some other things, and these are constitutional protections, right? We can petition our government. What does that look like practically speaking? Right? How many of you ever get either a text message or an email? Hey, this issue, whatever the hot button issue is, need to sign your name, sign this petition, send a pink slip to Congress, however they say it, right? That's one of the simplest things to do. It's on its face value, it's one of the least effective, because technology-wise, it's one of the easiest things and cheapest things to do. And an email is similar. It's got you have to put some time in yourself to send an email, but also emails can be generated automatically. Hey, cut and paste and send this. Okay. And legislators especially are getting wise to that. Phone call, you mentioned that. So phone calls are more effective. Now you've got a one-on-one contact.
And
right?
one of his first questions was, are you a constituent?
Okay, and we're going to get to that because understand this in all politics. constituents are royalty. It's one of, okay, and a lot of places have the right, if you're not a constituent, you can't. Right.
Yep.
But constituents are royalty. Right. Have everybody bombard the chair of the committee. Theoretically, the chair of the committee should care about what everybody in the state or the country thinks. But they really only answer to their constituents, and that's not really how reality works. A written letter or a postcard, way more effective than even write an email that you sent. More effective than even a phone call, because that takes time and a stamp and all that. Those are really helpful. Those are a pain. But they realize that's a pain. What's the biggest effect you can have?
Going to meet them in person in their office.
In-person interaction. In the office, if you really want to show a force, do it as a show of force, not rallies. I'm not against rallies, although I'll say in Texas, Convention of States, with all the tens of thousands of people had, we never held a rally. Every time we were at the Capitol, we were there to do business. And they knew we were there to do business. And if you want to have an effect, I'm not going to show the video, but I can show you there's 501 seats in the House gallery. We wanted the governor to make it an emergency item, so we had 400 to 450 people of those 501 at the State of the State address. And it was pretty effective means. Because normally, you know who can get people there? The left. In Texas, the University of Texas is literally blocks away. Their students can just walk over there. Getting conservatives to do that is unheard of. And that's the most effective. It's hard. And when legislators see the constituents show up, they're coming from El Paso, that's an 11-hour trip driving to Austin. That gets noticed.
The legislators on the floor were literally swiveling their heads around, looking up at all of us.
It's pretty
They couldn't
amazing.
believe it.
That's a pretty amazing moment. And then,
We got there first. We got there first.
oh yeah, you have to work at it. Just like the people who are at the memorial today, been in line overnight. We were there before the doors opened at the Capitol. We call, it's like, what do you do? What do you have to do to get in? First come, first serve. Cool.
Same thing with the State Board of Education meetings in Oklahoma.
Yep. Yep. So, I know we spent a lot of time on that, sorry, but there's challenges. It's a good question, but there's stuff we gotta do right now, and we gotta get believers, because that's gonna help a lot. Preach the gospel. We can have that fight later, right? What should we do? We gotta get there first. Okay. A proposed taxonomy on 7 views on religion and government. This is Andy Naselli's work. We're going to look at the definitions first before we even dive in. He's going to define religion, politics, and political theology. We're going to talk about, here's the views: secular suppression, religious separation, religious neutrality, religious influence, that's view 4. As he said, everybody's going to be 4 or 5 in here, in who we're speaking with. Religious influence, Christian government. We're going to dive into these. Religion over government, and government over religion. So, we're going to dive into each of these, and then we can, please feel free to discuss, ask questions. His definitions. Andy Naselli defines religion for his taxonomy. Religion is an organized system of beliefs that answers ultimate questions, commends certain actions or behaviors based on the answers to those questions. These questions concern ultimate reality, i.e. God, the nature of the universe, the nature of mankind, what happens to a man at death, and how we know right and wrong. As a Christian, I believe that the religious institution God has ordained is Christ's church. Now understand, in his definition and what he's trying to do, he's not talking just about Christianity, he's just talking about religion in general. So he's going to take into account Islam, obviously, and anything else. He wants to try and taxonomy, how do we define relationship between religion and government? Like, he wants to be broad enough. so that it can be helpful. His definition of politics is the science of art of governing men, to paraphrase Aristotle. In his article, he's referring specifically to politics at the civil level of government or the governing authorities or the state. So several different things there. And political theology is a theology of politics, particularly how religion and politics should relate. So a particular view of political theology is a philosophy or system of ideas that attempts to explain how religion and politics should relate. So, any questions at this point? Comments?
Just a comment on the first bullet point and the definitions there. I don't disagree with it necessarily, but it does present kind of a full approach. Because everything that is included in that bullet has an effect on how we live our lives. So I would broaden the definition of politics to how we live together as a community.
Yep. How do we have an organized civil society?
Not just civil, but like it's separated from, because that's directly connected to how we live our lives.
Okay. Anything else? He just wants to explain again his terms for religion and government and the fitting terms and how really that's changed historically. So in the ancient world, the fitting term for religion was religion, fitting term for government was politics. And really that's if you're reading stuff, right? If you're reading ancient stuff. Middle Ages and magisterial Protestantism, the term for religion was ecclesiastical government. And the fitting term for government was civil government. And he's choosing, and I think he's basically saying we're in early modern political thought here, church and state. They basically mean the same thing, it's just historical context. What are we dealing with? All right, I'm going to try and fly through most of these because we're not really going to focus on them. But view one is that secular suppression, that the secular government suppresses religion. An historical example would be Karl Marx. The position is the government and religion should be totally separate in the sense that the government should be secular because God does not exist. The government should not merely separate from religion, but should suppress religion. So a militantly atheist government does not consider its belief system to be over religion, by the way, but obviously it is, so secular. Modern examples he gives is the former Soviet Union, North Korea, secular progressivism. I know in part of the interview on this, one of the interviewers basically said it's kind of where we are in the United States right now. You could make a case that we're here, which is not a good place. you could make that case that we're here. So in view number one, the government protects itself from being contaminated by religion. View number two, religion protects itself from being contaminated by the government. So this is religious separation. Religion must radically separate from the government. So this position is the government and religion should be totally separate in the sense that they are distinct spheres that must not overlap because the government is worldly.
That's going to be the Amish.
Yeah, hold on. Consequently, individual Christians must separate from the government by not wielding the sword as combatants or as magistrates, because to do so would be to cooperate with a sinful institution. So that's true separation, right? We're not going to participate in it at all. That's right. Historic example, Anabaptists. Modern examples, traditional Mennonites. And then he named a couple people who I don't really know: Stuart Hauerwas, Greg Boyd. I have no idea who those people are, but I'm sure he's got references to them if you want to look them up. I didn't bother.
The Jehovah's Witnesses also.
Jehovah's Witnesses is a good example too, right? They don't vote. They aren't going to participate. They aren't going to.
They don't pledge allegiance.
Right? They don't pledge allegiance. They don't join the military. None of that. They're not going to be involved. Third view, religious neutrality. And just to jump ahead, they're basically all going to come to the agreement, whether they say it. This is really only a theoretical position. This is not there is no neutral. But here's the theoretical position. Government and religion should be separate in the sense that the government should be religiously neutral and particular religion should not influence the government. Government may be religiously neutral in one of two ways. One, by promoting no religion, which means it's pluralistic social secularism that does not necessarily deny God's existence, but wants to keep the peace between opposing religions. Or 2, by promoting a civil religion, which is, quote, a set of practices, symbols, and beliefs distinct from traditional religion, yet providing a universal values paradigm around which the citizenry can unite. I think you can make a case on point number 2 that there's, in some sense, the whole woke DEI, in a sense, that's a civil religion they're trying to promote. Pride Month, right? If you start having celebrations, that's kind of an indication you're somewhat of a religion.
A religion is a set of beliefs.
Yep, and we're going to celebrate it, right? We need to have times of celebration. So historical examples: classic liberalism, John Locke, John Stuart Mill, emphasis on free market. To some degree, America had a Protestant civil religion until the 1950s. I don't know if I would agree with that. Libertarianism, which is emphasis on individual autonomy. Progressive liberalism, emphasis on the welfare state, and freedom from traditional sexual ethics. Modern examples, he mentioned John Rawls, I have no idea who that is, who emphasizes religious neutrality in the government, and Daryl Hart, who emphasizes political neutrality in the church. So, unless you got questions, I don't really want to spend a whole lot of time here. View 4, in contrast to this, is the public square should not be religiously neutral. And really, you could change that to cannot be religiously neutral. So the position here is that the government should not promote only one particular religion. Yet religion may influence the government within limited parameters. So to read out this full statement, the position: the government and the church are separate in the sense that they have distinct God-authorized jurisdictions. God authorizes the government to wield the sword, which a government may justly do against an individual Christian who has broken the law. And God authorizes the church to exercise the keys, which a church may rightly do by refusing to affirm that an individual person with governmental authority is a Christian. The government should not exclusively promote a particular religion. Example, the government recognizes religious freedom and does not institute a state church or spread doctrine that is explicitly Christian. And the government should not restrict the spread of false religious beliefs. So the government should not refuse to allow a mosque to be built in the town square. But religion may influence the government. An individual governmental authority, like a United States Senator, may argue for a political position based on religion, and the government may adopt that position, but not on the basis of religion. The public square cannot be religiously neutral. It is a religious battleground for Christians. The church's mission is to make disciples. Individual Christians should significantly influence the government, and the government should not institutionalize Christianity. Example, the government should not put the Apostles' Creed in the Constitution. So that's big statement on the position here. Historic examples. Most Baptists, Second London Baptist Confession of Faith, that this is what historically they've held. Isaac Backus, don't know who that is, probably should. English nonconformist separatists such as Congregationalists and Quakers. Modern examples: Wayne Grudem, Jonathan Leeman, John Piper, Andrew Walker, who we've cited before, Scott Aniol, whose book we've cited here, David Van Drunen, whose book we've used, Robert George. Now, Robert George is a Catholic, but I think he's a professor at Georgetown, a constitutional professor. Any questions on this? There's going to be...
We should probably do 5 and then...
Yeah, and 5. View 5, religion should not merely influence the government should identify as a Christian government. And these are, he will definitely state, these are broad things, and it's almost a sliding scale in some respects. And you'll see that as we discuss some of the people in the interviews. By labeling View 5 as Christian government, he's using the specific adjective Christian instead of the more general adjective religious, because this view is peculiar to Protestant Christianity. So, this is unique. The position is that the government and the Christian church are two God-ordained institutions that have distinct and overlapping God-authorized jurisdictions, and they should work together under God's ultimate authority. Now, I don't think any of us have problems with agreeing with at least some of that, right? That for Christians, the church's mission is to make disciples of all nations. Individual Christians should significantly influence the government, and the government may institutionalize Christianity to some degree. Example, by putting God in the Constitution and by having a religious test for office. Now, he didn't mention this. We have something like this already in our nation, which is really obvious, and we'll know about it again in a little more than 3 months when December 25th rolls around and Christmas is a federal holiday. It is a uniquely Christian holiday, and yet it's a federal holiday. So it's not something we haven't done. We've recognized that.
Is this similar, so when our missionary from Sweden was talking about in Sweden, back whenever, decades ago, when you became an adult and a citizen, you also became a Christian. Is that this view?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It could be. It probably fits in this view. It's probably not view 6. The government should identify as Christian government in the sense that the laws and customs it promotes derive from the ultimate authority of God. The governing authorities should know that they are accountable to God for how they rule. References Daniel 4:26. It is fitting for the government to exhort citizens to fear the living God. Daniel 6:26. The government should pursue justice by promoting the natural law, which the Ten Commandments summarize, as much as prudently possible. The government should, along with the church and society, help create cultural conditions conducive for conversion and for the common good. While the government should promote and to some degree enforce a just social order based on a right understanding of God and man, example, government should promote marriage and the family and demote no-fault divorce, adultery, homosexuality, transgenderism, and pornography. The government should not force citizens to follow Christianity, since only the Spirit's regeneration produces a heart change. The church's weapon is not the sword, but instead the word, water, bread, and wine. This model is not feasible long-term if many of the citizens are not genuine Christians. So that's Andrew Naselli's position. If the citizens aren't Christians, this isn't feasible long-term. That's his position. We can discuss that if you wish now. It's going to give historical examples, which are interesting. Magisterial reformers such as Martin Luther, John Calvin, Ulrich Zwingli, John Knox, Richard Hooker, Johannes Althusius, the Reformed Scholastics, the Church of England, Mr. Baptist John Gill, American Puritans such as John Winthrop, William Bradford, John Cotton, Cotton Mather, Jonathan Edwards. The basic approach in various colonies and states at the time of America's founding. Okay, so that's not a thin list of great, theologians and others who've held to this.
But to make his point, it never held up.
Okay. Does that mean it's wrong? Just because something doesn't last, does that mean it's not right and we shouldn't do it? I'm just asking the question. I'm not answering it. Right? Scripture is the ultimate authority in what we do. Modern examples: Brad Littlejohn, Doug Wilson, Joe Rigney, Daniel Strand. Some versions of Christian nationalism, though many who hold this position do not prefer that label. Any more questions on this? We are going to spend most of our time on, 15 minutes left. Most of it on discussing these two. View 5, government enforces a particular ethic that is tied to religion. In view 6, religion controls the government to such a degree that the government enforces the religion itself. So I'm not going to dive into it, but this is mostly the Roman Catholic
Yep.
view. The right historic example is the two swords view of medieval Roman Catholicism. Now he said, modern example, he wasn't sure what to suggest. He was thinking of Rushdoony, but then he was kind of corrected by somebody who was a colleague of Rushdoony. He says Rushdoony's misunderstood. He really wouldn't fall into that. He'd fall more into category 5.
But the Vatican,
Yeah, but you have to. The Vatican
City.
is yeah, right. They don't really hold any control over the world from a truly authoritative, right, wielding the sword perspective.
What about like radical Islam?
We got one view left. Views 6 and 7 are right. So this one shows religion over government, and there's a couple things with Islam, and we'll talk about in a minute. But 6 and 7 are a single unified polity with two distinct authorities: government and religion. View 6 is religion over government, and view 7 is government over religion. Government governs religion with a state church, forces citizens to follow, or at least not to oppose, a particular religion. In a sense, the distinction here between government and religion breaks down in that the government is a political religion. Government and religion are integrated. Historic examples: ancient Egypt, when its pharaoh was oppressing God's people prior to the Exodus. Roman emperor worship, maybe Constantine. Erastianism, example Henry VIII. Typically Islam when it's a nation's dominant religion. Modern examples: Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. To your point, I think he was actually spoke with some people who were Muslim, and it's like, we don't even understand. This doesn't even make sense to us, right? Of course it's this. But they didn't understand having a distinction. Of course it's government and religion. It's all.
It seems to me like the 6 would be more applicable to that because religion is the all-encompassing idea and the government is a space within it. Whereas, I mean, this almost implies that you could have that form of government without religion. I'm thinking like Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
Yeah, they almost should just be the same circle superimposed.
which would put views 6 and 7 as the exact same.
Right, right.
Not going to spend time because we're not here to discuss them. All right, so he had some reflections on these. I'm going to run through these real quickly. His taxonomy is describing rather than evaluating. He wasn't trying to evaluate at this point what was good or bad. He was just describing this is what it is. Trying to systematize the views is challenging, but that should not prevent us from trying. He admits this is almost certainly not perfect. Right? This is really difficult to nail this down. He has a lot more to say. Taxonomy may mislead one to think that the various views on the spectrum are distinct in neat and tidy ways, which is not true. I highlighted the next two. Christians are becoming more interested in political theology because what seemed to be a neutral public square is now an increasingly polarized battleground. And I'll remember a statement my state senator made, but I'm sure, again, it's not his own, but he made it. This was he was discussing the battle down in Texas over, at that point, the bathroom bill. 2016, when President Obama said, you don't have to worry about your gender in public, especially public schools. You can use whatever bathroom you want. Texas pushed back right away, and as our senator stated in one meeting, he said, look, you may not be interested in politics, but politics is interested in you. It's never going to get out of your life, right? So that's kind of what this is saying, is that we're becoming aware because they're not just going to leave us alone, right? I just want to be left alone. I just want to be left alone. I do want to be left alone, but...
It's always when it gets personal.
Yep, it's always when it gets personal. Shooting somebody and killing them gets a little personal. Christians should be aware of prematurely separating from each other based on different political theologies. This is key. We get so protective of our own views. It's obvious through history. This has been debated over and over, and I don't think it's ever going to get resolved completely. until Christ comes. I don't see that. It's just, there's, again, I listen to all these points, it's like, they're all making good points. And I'm having a hard time, get to a point where it's like, okay, I don't know if I agree with that now on some points, but, and then he said, no civil government will be flawless until King Jesus returns. So, those are his reflections. Any thoughts on that before I dive into at least the first part of the next section?
Just one with the circles for reform. It seems to me a different way of thinking, or using different parts of my brain when I think of government as a concept or religion as a concept in the circles. I think of them as a bunch of people. Well, it's just a bunch of people. You draw a bunch of little heads in there. 'Cause that's what
Yes. Think about it more personally, and so we can have relationally, because just big secret on, if you want to get into activism, relationships, building relationships. You can work with almost anybody if you're willing to build a relationship. And that means you're going to have to be willing to work with people with whom you probably disagree on a bunch of stuff. Relationships.
Do I
What?
get to show my give my example yet?
I think so, in a minute. So he had 12, so there were 12 interviews, and he had 12 reflections, not on the different people, but he just had 12 reflections, this was really encouraging. The interviewees are basically within views 4 and 5 in my taxonomy. And again, view 4 was religious influence, and view 5 was a Christian government. They agree on the following. So all these people, and I don't have the full list here, but included Scott Aniol, Doug Wilson, Stephen Wolfe, Joe Boot, Andrew Walker, but he said, here's the points they agree on. The government and the church are separate in the sense that they have distinct God-authorized jurisdictions. Have we not discussed that in class? God-authorized jurisdictions. The public square cannot be religiously neutral. It is a religious battleground. They all agree on that. They agree on the church's mission is to make disciples. He's got a quote here from Doug Wilson. Some people are afraid of Christian nationalism being an ecclesiocracy where the clerics or the ministers are running the show as Muslim clerics are functioning in Iran. I don't think that would be wise or smart at all. I don't think that the church has that role. I think the church should simply be preaching the gospel, building people up in their faith, feeding them the word of God, and expecting them, as intelligent Christians, taught Christians, to go figure out what to do in the coding world, and in the bicycle repair world, and in the astrophysics world. That's all kingdom work. So that fair? The church's job is to preach the gospel, make disciples. Here in church, you're being taught skills, which are really skills on how to navigate and manage your life biblically, biblical worldview, and then it's kind of up to you, right? Thankfully, our pastors don't call us and individually say, here's how you should do your job today. Here's how you should run your household today, right? They're giving you the principles. We have the freedom and the liberty to work that out. They agree that individuals, Christians, should significantly influence the government. And they agree that the government should not force citizens to follow Christianity, since only the Spirit's regeneration produces a heart change. The church's weapon is not the sword, but instead the word, prayer, water, bread, and wine. So they all agree on those, some very fundamental things. They disagree on whether it would be good to have a Christian government. So here's where some of the differences roll. View 4, religious influence. Government should neither exclusively promote a particular religion nor restrict the spread of false religious beliefs. Nor should they adopt a policy on the basis of Christian beliefs, nor should they institutionalize Christianity. Now again, those are some hard and fast things, but you start hearing the interviews and he'll even say, some people are kind of, well, they're in between 4 and 5. I'm pretty sure I'm in between 4 and 5. I'm probably getting closer to 5.
No. I need to give my example because it fits with all this.
Okay, give your example.
Okay, so you might think that prohibition was 100 years ago. It has no impact on the church. It doesn't matter. One of the drivers of prohibition, when Christians were controlling, was the Reverend Thomas Welch. He believed that wine was sinful. In every way, he believed wine was sinful. So when prohibition happened, he said, here's my handy dandy grape juice that I've invented, because this is not sinful, use this in communion. The Catholic Church said, absolutely not, you do not have the keys to our church. The Christian Church handed over those keys. They said, sure, we'll use grape juice, no problem. And 100 years later, there are still people saying, no problem with grape juice. Why this is personal to me is when I would read the scriptures, it said wine. Now, Alan believes that it was watered wine. It was very low alcohol back then, which is fine. And it was still wine. Reverend Thomas Welch said, all alcohol is sinful. And he invented another incense to use in communion. And it really upset me every communion when all that was offered was grape juice, because I didn't believe that was right. Now, you may believe I don't want to bind anybody else's conscience, but the Welch family bound my conscience for the last 100 years.
The government bound conscience. Prohibition. Let me ask this. Have there been any examples since then of the government binding the conscience of the church? Maybe like 5 years ago. Any
COVID.
examples?
COVID.
So, to your example, you're basically saying the churches were cowardly,
Yes.
right, to not stand up. Do you have any examples in maybe recent history where, again, there was prohibition? Now, the good news on that, prohibition was overturned,
But
right?
the churches kept with that.
Okay, but that's up to them at that point, right? The government's no longer coercing them to do that.
Right.
That's up to them.
But they
So,
gave her that
Mike?
key and it never came back.
2015 in Oberfeld.
Okay. Yeah, so even before that, Obergefell, which things were going downhill fast. Everything has accelerated since that decision. Everything has accelerated since that decision. Yes, and now there's maybe some movement at some point to try and overturn that. But yeah, churches let them prohibit from meeting because of COVID, when it is strictly stated, right, we must, right, to meet together, right, meet together. And as soon as it was figured out, this isn't nearly as dangerous as they're saying, and that should have been within weeks. Right? Our church was going to do it, right? Our church down in Texas, like, we're done. Now the governor lifted it, but it wasn't going to matter. We were going to start meeting. And I know, obviously, the major example in California with John MacArthur, but they didn't start meeting again until it was a while, right? It was July. The elders had, and you have to go through that big church and stand up, and it was still illegal, but they did it anyway. Yeah, we have to stand strong. Okay. We'll continue this part next week because this is good. Next week, I'll just next week's going to be finish this up, and then all practical. What are practical things we can do? This is going to be feedback from you. I'm going to try and stay out of it. There's a lot of things I have done before. I may do some again. Who knows? I'm not going to get sucked in at this point in my life. But there's things we can do now, right? Again, the orcs aren't just at the gates. They've already infiltrated the government. So, and we don't have to wait till we have 60. We shouldn't wait. We should never wait till we have 60. We don't have to wait till we have more than just us, right? We have to live faithfully. That's the whole thing and I had Charlie Kirk up there, and what I started the class with. If you live faithfully to Christ, you're going to be good. Right? Just apply everything you learn faithfully. Biggest thing you can do, get married. I know a lot of our young folks aren't here today. Get married young and have kids. Get married, right? Don't wait till you have the perfect job and career and you're all settled, because it doesn't matter. It's people work through it. Yes, Jean. Mm. Yes. And, okay.
She sent it last night, but it was too late. It was too late to start watching it last night.
Talking about the Truth Rising.
Truth Rising, and I've heard of that. I'd already heard of that. I hadn't
I'll
known.
see it last night, but I didn't make it.
I had heard that that was coming out, and I didn't really. Yep. 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 Yeah, so John Solomon, who's a guest on whatever that podcast is, the longer one, everything, gosh, what the heck is it? I've got it in our links, and I listen to it every day, but he's on every Friday discussing, and he's mentioned the film multiple times and the making of it, and just how exciting that was, so, and encouraging, so. Yes, all right, so this is it's a good place to break. Anyway, we'll discuss, and we'll work in the brothers, allies, co-belligerents type of discussion, because you're going to have to figure out how to navigate that. Anything you do, it's just, you got to figure out where you literally have to figure out where you draw a line, and where you draw a line and where my wife draws a line may be different, and you're going to have to figure out how to work that out. All right, all good. We're gonna have a good time this morning in our service as well. Our Father and our God, we thank you. We praise you for your mercies, your kindness. Ask you to be with us now this morning as we come to worship. The greatest privilege you give us is to worship together as a body. Just a taste of heaven, taste of the rest that awaits us. Again, we ask your hand upon the memorial service today in Glendale, safety, and mostly that your gospel goes forth with power. Father, today here at our own church, that the gospel would be preached and go forth with power. We rest on that. We trust in the finished, completed work of Christ. It's in his name we pray. Amen.